I'll be showing you today how to scan a body. So what you'll learn in the Essential course, the Essential Prema Therapeutic course, from me is how to read a body, how to look at a body, and how to realign it. So when someone is struggling, particularly with an injury, by basically bringing them into the center is the first thing that I use in terms of helping them overcome whatever ailment it may be physically, in terms of like a knee or back or shoulder. So it's quite easy to do. It's just you have to look for it. So I use basic geometry, how to line up the body. So today I'll show you how to read from the feet to the knees, to the pelvis, into the shoulders, and from the face. And then as you get more skilled in looking at a person, then you can look at clothing, you can look at skin even, and the lines of a face. You know, the older the practitioner is, the easier it is to read. So if you're working with someone that's older, you'll see it more clearly in terms of how you can help realign them. So at first it might be a bit daunting where to start, but this is something that we'll cover in the course quite extensively, because I really believe it's such a great way to help support someone overcoming limitations and ailments. So you can look at it in any basic position. So I'm in a symmetrical position, which is Virasana. If you sit long enough in any position for meditation, and this is a very basic thing that you could use for yourself, is video the meditation, and at some point you're going to start to see habitually the body will move into a level of comfort, or just a habitual pattern, and that pattern will be quite consistent. But once you see it, you know, and that could come it could come at 1 minute in the meditation, it could come at 3 minutes, but it will come, and then you could correct it. And then as you correct it, then you'll see how it will overlay in most positions. From a position of forward bending, it's very easy to see a body in terms of the posterior. So you can see how we can measure the hips, and then we can also get into looking at the landscape of the torso and how the ribs sit in space. This is probably one of the easiest ways in seeing scoliosis. So genetic scoliosis is different from habitual, or just how people sit and how people stand becomes more and more of a pattern. And in knowing that from a forward bend, it's really easy to see genetic scoliosis. Just someone falls forward, you'll see it right away. And then with someone that has habitual scoliosis, there's ways to see it as well, but you have to bend the knees to do that. Again, it's something that you work from the feet into the ankles, into the knees, into the pelvis, the shoulders, and then into the face. So if you look at someone from the front, you can look at them from the back. You can look at them from the sides, and then even from the bottom up. Like if I had wet feet on pavement, I'd actually see how I would distribute the weight on a hot surface. So if I stood off or I walked off that pavement, you can very well see where the weight is and how someone stands. So, because yoga is very repetitive in the sequencing that you'll teach, I'll make all these little points in terms of how I'm looking at someone and practicing, and I may not correct them right away, but I'll make a note of it. And then as we get later in the class, and we get later and we get more trust, you know, that's a big thing. If someone trusts me and it's not too overwhelming to reveal these insights that I see, then I'll give them to people. So I really use them in a very subtle way when I'm working with a group class or I'm working with someone privately. But when I'm doing a training, it's quite interesting, and that's something that we can do, and we will do, is look at each other and understand how we can help correct the way that we stand, the way that we sit, and the way that we hold our positions. So I'm excited to share this with you today, and I'm very much excited to share this with you in the course. One. Okay, so we're looking at winning from the front in Tadasana. So people will, when you're looking in terms of scanning, they'll stand how they want to stand. She happens to stand probably with more attention because she's aware of this. So I would just ask her to take her feet apart about the width of her sit bones, and then it's a little bit more accurate where you can look at the feet and read the feet. The classical stance typically is where the feet are together, but with this, then I can get a better read of her arches and whatnot. That's where we're going to start in reading this viewpoint of Tadasana. So it's not so much like I'm looking for people in terms of standing and attention. I'm just looking for imbalances. And even the most, precise practitioner, as you get more skilled in looking at people, it's very easy to see like who's right-handed and there's a rotation in hips or shoulders, or head can be a little bit skewed. And we'll go over all these points in this class today. So I'm looking from the front. And then in looking from the front, what I can see is that there's more effort in one foot than the other. So she has a tendency to grip more with her left foot. So it's her right side, and I'll point this out later, is a bit lower. Her right shoulder is lower. If you look at her arms, her hands, you can notice that her right arm is lower than her left. So like when people are standing in Tadasana, something that I use is that I'll have them close their eyes, and then I can scan through over the whole room. I can look at everybody and I can point out things. But again, like I said earlier, there's reoccurring positions, so it's always kind of easy to see in terms of how you can help realign your students. So I'm looking at the feet, and by looking at the feet, it's just that one foot collapses in more, like her left foot has more, it's just the arch is a little bit more flattened. So an easy way to correct that for people is that I could just put a block on the inside of her left ankle, and then that would bring more awareness where her shin would actually carry out and the weight would go back into the left foot. So like I said about having more weight in the right side, is that an easy way to help correct that, just for instance for a weight imbalance, is that she could pick up her right heel off the floor, and then that'll shift weight into the left foot. And if it's difficult for someone, because it will be on one side, you'll see where your student body has more weight in one foot. So she could bring the right heel down, and then she could lift the left heel. And she, when I have an open relationship with a student, I'll if I don't see it, I'll basically ask them, was it more difficult to shift into one side? I've been looking at this for a long time with people, so it's really easy for me to see. If I just want people to be more vocal, then I'll ask them these questions, but I can see them for myself. So she can lower the left heel down. With an aging practitioner, this is really, really a big part of this, is that you're looking at how the tibia relates to the knee. It's the biggest part in terms of why people will have knee problems. Because some people genetically, their tibias are rotated too far in, or they're too far out, or they have a difficulty extending the knee fully. And all these really factor into why someone may have chronic knee pain. And that's the biggest injury that I've seen over the years in teaching yoga. Like number one, even more so than back pain. They're pretty neck and neck. Back pain and knee pain are probably what you'll probably see most often in working with people in terms of their yoga practice. So what I'm saying is that with the shins, they'll tell you a lot. kind of like the shins are very similar to the eyes of the face. Like some people will go, their heads will turn. So her right shin actually turns out more than her left. And her left turns out a little bit too in relation to her patellas. So I'm not going to lift up her pants anymore, but her patella on the right is like, this is the line. And then with the right, so if she had problems with the knees, I'd work on manually rotating this shin in so that the line would help in aiding in less stress in that side. And because she's right-handed, it's kind of like there's more labor on the right side. So who knows, maybe later in life she would have more problems with her right side more than her left. When you're not using your left side because it's a right-handed world, the left side becomes chronically stiff and a bit dumb. Like it doesn't move as well. So that's where we have problems on the non-dominant side or typically with the left side. So when we look at her hips, you may see that hip doesn't move as well. I know my left side doesn't articulate as well. My left arm, my left leg. So I work on that pretty diligently in my own practice to help with balancing out my own imbalances. So you can cross-reference bones. So ankles, like you can measure this ankle, this malleolus, to this patella. If you really wanted to be accurate, I never do this, but you could use a tape measure and you could basically see if there's an imbalance between those two bones. And then from the right side to the left, and then you can take it up into the ASIS. So just in standing in front of her, I can see that her right hip is more forward than her left, right? And now she's pulling it back a little bit, and now she's more in the middle. But to better see like what's more obvious is we'll take it back up to the top so she can turn to face you guys, and then just look at the shoulders in relation as far as the level or the height. So her right side, she knows this, it's lower. My right side's lower too. You know, it's just like what you use will get more worn out. But when I take a block underneath her right arm, and then she drops it down into the block, you'll now see that the shoulders are more even. And this doesn't look like a lot, but let's say a lifetime you're leaning or you're using that side, it definitely gets worn out. Like it you know, and this is where you can see imbalances, like in terms of like when I correct someone in a headstand, I'll correct them. They'll be in that correction for about 3, maybe 5 seconds, and then they'll slowly drift back into where they typically go. And that's why it's a big reason why people rock when you give them corrections in, like, say, a headstand. But so there's logos in everything, typically with yoga clothing. So yoga clothing could be a really good way to help you and measure someone, like seams on a pants. Right? The seam in the front. So if you look at the seam, her seam turns to her right more than her left. I mean, we're not going to go that detailed, but in the training we will. We'll look at these things in terms of, and this is what will separate you from an average yoga teacher and to an outstanding yoga teacher. Like getting that detail with someone makes a world of difference in terms of how you could help another person. But again, I don't always. So I'm measuring now from the hips to the shoulders. So the same line. Like if she had a backpack on, you could see straps, right? You would see that one strap is lower than the other. With clothing, you'll see, like, especially when you wear something a bit baggier, like a tank top, you'll see that the clothing starts to bunch up on the side that's a little bit more imbalanced. It's really easy to see. And I'll show you this more in detail as we are together in the training. So I look from the front, that's initially what I do, but I can look from behind. I'm not going to look from behind. I can look from the side, but again, it's the relation of how the feet are, into the hips, into the shoulders, and into the head. So we'll just do is we'll look from more of this side. So just because she's forward, just one last time, is that you'll see people, and this is a chronic thing that you'll see with people, is that their feet turn out. And that indicates that there's more tightness in the outsides of the hips. Again, especially with someone that's, you know, well into their 70s or 80s, you'll see like a big turnout on most people. So that's something that you could look at. For gentlemen, it's very easy to see like how is that there's an anterior tilt in the pelvis. So the pelvis kind of, women typically use their lower back more than they need to when they stand and when they sit. And it's in men too. It's prevalent in men. So the more weakness you get in the abdomen, the more you'll see the posterior kind of stick out. So you can kind of see that the weight is forward, right? I'm going to exaggerate, but if she bends her knees, then her hips will carry forward. Right? See how her hips are a little bit more forward than her shoulders. So when she stands and gets her legs straight, it's trying to help and educate her in getting her tailbone to move down. So she has her hands on her hips. She can be in more of an anterior tilt. And then this is anterior, and then this is posterior. So she's moving the tailbone down. And she knows how to do it very well in both ways, but you'll notice when she does the posterior, it takes a little bit more effort, and that would be like one of the first things that I would help her in correcting. And I know that she has tighter hamstrings, so that factors into why the pelvis may sit the way that it does. So for most and some men, you're going to see more of a posterior kind of, like their pelvis is fully underneath them. So it's really easy to see from the side. And then you can measure the head. So how does the head measure to the pelvis? How does the head measure to the feet? Super common in older demographic in terms of how to help them in terms of their alignment. So but what I'm looking for from the front is that, how does her pelvis relate in space? So again, this is such a common position in yoga, but with her, I see that her right hip is more forward, right? So with her right hip forward, she's actually turning to her left a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have her pull her right hip back, and then, but when you're online and you're working with someone, you can't use your hands. But what you could say is, imagine I'm pulling your right hip back in space. And then by pulling their hip back, it carries everything over to that one side. And if what feels right isn't necessarily correct. It's not that it's wrong, and it's not that she's going to get hurt from being over to the left more. But in terms of, like I said, circulation and her body, it makes sense to bring her more back into the middle. And that's what I'm basically doing. And then when she's here, you can read the spine. So you could literally see how the spine relates in terms of a forward bend. Like, does it carry over to one side more than the other? Is it rounded? I know very well that she has more, when she stands, she's more anterior tilt. When she sits, sometimes she's more posterior tilt, and that's just because I know her very well. But it's things that you can really see and make a difference in terms of your student body. So what she can do is, with a healthy spine, it's healthy to roll up, right? With someone with a herniation, you'd probably want to bring the hands on the hips and then have her come up into an upright position with extension. So she's going to extend up as you would if you had a herniation, and then she could just bring the arms down in space. But she's going to take her arms out to the side, and she's going to take her arms up overhead. And as she takes her arms up into an overhead position, this is another way that you can see if someone's leaning to one side or if one arm is higher than the other. And it's, again, what what feels even may not always be the case. But she has a nice practice, and that it's just, like I had said about what wears out, is it's the right side that's a little bit, it's a little bit flatter. So that's why she's going to have more weight in her right side, and that's why that side's going to be a little bit lower. And it's not so much of a critical thing, but as you inform them of that, they'll be like, oh, okay, that's what I need to pick up. But for most people, it's going to be turning them, right? I often say this, is that what you see is what you see, but what you see and what you observe could be something very revealing, in that if she were to look and see, and she can take the arms down, but when you look and you see and you're like, wow, I see most of my apartment from the left, but I don't see much of anything on my right. So understanding where your blind spot is a very, very big thing. It's a very revealing and informative way of understanding how to see life, because what you can't see is what you may actually get hit by, especially if you're in a high traffic city. So knowing like what's around you is in my opinion, very important. So you can kind of see how the practitioner's angled, and as you correct them more into the middle, it makes a big difference. She sits very well, and then what you could do is say, it's a little bit harder for you to see, is that you could ask your students to place their hands behind their thighs, and that she could sit more upright, and then ask them to close their eyes, right? And then you could look through your gallery view of teaching Zoom, and you can make mental notes of what you can see, right? Because if you're looking at people and they see that you're looking at them, they might actually be a bit insecure about it, but they might actually like kind of hide the imbalances that they may have. Not that that's a bad thing, right? Again, we'll all have imbalances, but you can see like a little bit more into the practitioner with their feet and with their hips. So like you can see how the connection of the feet are together and which side actually pushes more together. And by knowing that, then you'll see like which side they lean to. But with their knees, they're pretty even. But with most people, you're going to see an elevated knee. And again, that's typically the side that just doesn't move as well, right? And what moves really well is what you're going to use and what may wear out. And then what I said earlier, what you don't use is what becomes stiff and possibly arthritic. And that's why you want to be moving the opposing side, not just getting into that point. What you could look at, so as I was saying, it might take you some time to really look at another person and to see the imbalances that I see. But it's just something that you'll put a little bit more time into, and like I said, it would separate you from being, it's good what you know as far as a yoga teacher. You can obviously use what you already know, but adding to what you know and seeing a little bit more on a deeper level in terms of how asymmetry works. And knowing the asymmetries of the body, it's really that simple to make the practice that much better, right? So it's not a bad thing. So if you're revealing this to someone, it's actually a very positive thing. It's not like I have a way of presenting it where it's a positive spin, and that it's only going to make their practice and their life better. So I hope this helped. You can always reach out to me with any questions you may have on this topic. Like I said, in the training, we'll go over it more in detail, and you can work with people individually, and we'll kind of see how we do sit in positions and how we do stand in positions and how we can make them all better. All right. Thank you.